I'm Cory Peterson with the Project Advantage podcast. Today we have Paul Randall, Associate Director of Strategy at Speero, a leading experimentation agency focused on experimentation-led growth.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
And of course, you and I have known each other for a while. I think we've worked together for 3-4 years now?
Yeah, I was going to say over 2, but I think it has been closer to 3 or 4 in various ways. But our program currently is at least 1 or 2 years old. We started off with doing some research, and yeah, I think we'll probably touch on kind of where we've led to now and what our program together looks like.
So in its simplest form, can you describe for our audience what experimentation is and what experimentation-led growth really means?
Yeah, so what we do is we try and use a process of testing to determine what to do more of and what to do less of. And it can be very easy to make a lot of plans and want to try and execute on those plans. But what we try and do is create a system and a flywheel that allows teams to know how to accelerate their growth, really. A lot of it comes from research, but the fundamental is finding the right testing method to help determine if what you're doing is actually working. And of course, once you've done that, you can do a lot more of what works and then try things which don't work and then stop going down those roads. So it's a system of increasing the number of tests and the impact that you get over time so that you're constantly adapting faster than the people around you.
It's interesting. And we, of course, at LED Lighting Supply have been doing this sort of work for a while, which is actually what led you and I to talking today, because given that our customers and the focus of this podcast is really around contractors and facilities managers, you and I were talking about, well, how could these sorts of principles be applied directly in their businesses? And that's really our goal with the podcast is, how can we help people on the ground floor working, in facilities, working with customers directly who maybe don't necessarily have the digital marketing background? How can they, take these concepts and move forward with them?
Yeah. So whilst we've done a lot of work on the website, we've also talked about email funnels and channels. And the concept applies in areas of business that you want to work in, the types of conversations that you have with people. It's less about the execution and more about the mindset of, I want to try something, determine how I can measure that to see if it's successful or not, and then try and iterate and improve on it. So it could be the way that you do a quoting process. It could be the way that you speak to customers or try and gain new business. Or it could be to what we do a lot of with yourselves is actually content on the website and how can we help improve it from that side. And what works time and time again is understanding and learning from your customers what really works, what to do more of, and getting that feedback. So it's the mindset that can be applied everywhere. Unfortunately for the people in my industry, it applies into their personal life as well, in gardening and personal development and everything. But it's the idea of having these little feedback loops so that you can not just kind of ruthlessly try and execute a plan, but determine if what you're doing is actually having the right effect and then making tweaks and iterations alongside that. So it's a bit of a two-way process, but I would definitely say it's an approach that can be applied everywhere to learn and be open about what you're seeing and what you're taking in.
Our podcast studio is here in Nashua, New Hampshire. Let's say I'm a contractor. We have a couple of people on the team. We work in some commercial facilities, every now and then some industrial, some residential. Really, wherever the opportunities take us, we're ready to handle them. How would I go about getting feedback from the customers about what they liked or didn't like? Normally you hear if someone thinks you did a good job, but I think it's a lot harder to get the negative feedback until it's too late.
Yeah, it's a great example. I would say the people who are in touch with your customers the most, the sales team, the people who are interacting with them day in day, are a great source of inspiration, and they know a lot more than you maybe do on the outside. And that's what we look to try and take a lot from. In your instance, there was also a lot of Trustpilot work. We noticed the individual representative's name. There was a great indication. So we would be talking to those people and finding out, like, what are their common questions? What are their objections? What are their hesitations? What do they really love? And taking those signals on board and saying, where can we apply that? Can we try and put this forward in front of people a little bit earlier with case studies, with presentations? What did they really like? And turning that into a bit of an idea, a bit of a hypothesis to test of how might we be able to do that a little bit more. So it's something that can be applied everywhere. And I'd say, yeah, asking questions, being curious. And it's not about having the answers yourself, but finding the approach that works for you.
And I think for our audience, they're so busy. Actionable insights are key. A first step they could take is go pull all of your Google reviews. If you use Trustpilot, pull your Trustpilot reviews and see what they say. Read through them, and let's, at a very beginning, just categorize them into groupings.
Yeah. And speak to your team. Find out what the common questions are, and then review your material and see if you're doing enough of a good job from that. Those are the key areas. And what I would say is that the more research that you can do, the better the results can be. So it's finding out how can you gather information that's most relevant to you. Not always looking at, competitors and what other people are doing, because ultimately your business is unique and the way that you handle things is very different to others. So it's a lot more about seeing what you're doing really well and how you can maximize that in other areas.
So you've mentioned about a website. I've seen thousands of websites myself of all different shapes, forms, and sizes. We, of course, have a more e-commerce-y website, LED Lighting Supply. Paul, I know you previously have worked with companies that also have more e-commerce-y websites. Some are more of a landing page style where someone's going on to submit a form or make a call. Most contractors, most facility management companies, theirs is going to be more that landing page style. It's going to basically be the front window of the store, if you will. Where do you start with that?
I guess the first thing to say is that we're imperfect creatures. We don't read everything. There's a lot of skimming that's going on. So the first thing is that the attention span of anyone is going to be a lot shorter than you expect. So whilst you might have a lot of information on there, you can guarantee, and what we've seen a lot of times is that people aren't reading all of it. So they're very kind of quick skimmers. Is this relevant to me? Why should I stay on here and discover a little bit more? That's the big thing first, is to make sure that your key points are really front and center and understood, to keep them on the site and keep them on the page, because our attention spans have reduced over time and social media doesn't help. And we have other distractions that come on. So whether we're browsing it on our phone or on our desktop computers, we just don't have as much time to make those decisions. Or maybe we're a bit more ruthless in making those decisions very quickly. So that's the first thing. Is it's kind of cliche of first impressions, but also knowing that you have kind of 3 or 5 seconds to grab someone's attention, and you want to make sure that they come away with that, with a understanding of why they should hang around and find out a little bit more.
And for, the customers coming to contractors, it's really about, how can you help solve my problem? How can you help alleviate the pain point that I'm having?
Yeah, that's what they want. They don't necessarily want a whole story about where you started and how you came about, but why should I trust you? Why should I consider you? So that's the big thing of kind of building that trust as easy as you can, as quickly as you can from that side.
There's been an electrical contractor advertising on the radio in the Boston area recently, and the pitch of the advertisement on the radio is, we have real people who will answer the phone when you call. And they're not contractors. They're people trained to answer the phone and help guide you towards scheduling an appointment. Now, I never would have thought that personally that this was such a big pain point. I've certainly called contractors and have left a voicemail, but apparently they found that it was a big enough pain point where we're going to not only hire a team to answer the phone, but we're going to spend money to actually publicize that we're doing this.
Yeah, there's obviously a real pain point there of either trying to get hold of people and not being able to, or leaving messages and not knowing when there's a reply. I think we've all had a, sort of a ghosted email or message, or you try and fill in an inquiry form with no understanding of when that's going to be replied. And, also bear in mind, you're not the only people that they're considering. There may be two or three. And the speed of feedback, the speed of getting back to somebody has a huge impact on that. So it's pretty smart to say that if you get in touch with us, we'll get back to you really quickly. And if you're the first person to reply and then start that conversation down the road, even if the company who's better with more accreditation and sort of better products replies maybe 1 or 2 weeks later, it might be too late. So kind of speed is a great one, but also they've touched on an emotional trigger there, which makes people go, I hate it when that happens. And that's a little bit of what we work on as well. But it's not about kind of playing a game. It's not about pulling on heartstrings and making people do things that they don't want to do. If you can elevate the emotional side in a really positive way, that's always going to kind of hang on and be consistent. And so, yeah, that might be what they lean on first to make a difference and make people make that call on the radio.
And I think also the key is addressing the negative, that they're coming right out in saying it, that there's this perception that we don't call back, or that if we do call back, it's going to be too late. And they're trying to take advantage of it. So I think regardless if, you have a contracting firm of 1 or 2 people, there's a certain way you can deal with it. If you're a larger firm, there's a different way you can deal with it. With 1 or 2 people on the team, we might really only be able to respond once a day. At the end of the day, we get home from the jobs we're working on, and we're then going to email or call the people back. But if we set that expectation, then the customers know what to expect. And as you and I both know, we recently ran a test on our website. Setting expectation is key, and it makes such a big difference. So you don't need to have a team of 50 people to do these sorts of actions and these sorts of improvements.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe a misconception in some areas, that you need a huge volume of traffic to be able to run any type of test or experiment. But you can do this with 2 different team members, and you can mix it up. There's a lot of tests going on around billboards. Now, billboards seems like a very static thing, but by doing it in different geographic locations and having one versus the other, they can then look to combine the analysis and determine if one makes the difference more than the other. Now, if you can do that in an area like billboards, where it's really hard to sort of make the connection, you can do it with smaller teams. You just have to be careful about how you take a different approach and measure it from there. But yeah, you talked about kind of fears, uncertainties, and doubts. We talk about this a lot as well. You don't want to skirt around them, because your customers, your prospects, ourselves, we have them. And it's where you can address it early on that makes people stay and hang around. It's not always what people say as well, which can be the tricky thing, but it's a good way of discovering it and finding out what the common questions, common objections are, or bright spots. And it might be to that company who you mentioned, they just really like talking to people and being able to get a response on the phone. And that feedback led somebody to have an idea to run it. And I imagine the performance of that particular ad will be based on that insight and that recommendation and that test. So it's about having that mindset of making decisions with data, whatever data that might be, and using it to inform your next step. It's one of the reasons why we don't have kind of very lengthy 6-12-month plans. As you know, Cory, the direction that we go in can change based on one test to the next. So you want to have a good direction to go in, but you also know that you can't predict, and you find out what works and what doesn't and adjust accordingly. And that's the other area, which I think is a little bit different, and we can probably touch on, is that I forget this a lot. Being used to things failing and things losing is something that you build up a resilience to, not as a worry that my idea didn't work, that my instinct was incorrect, but using it as a signal to move in a different direction. And I'm always reminded that that isn't normal outside of it, and it's an area that I think we've kind of learned to understand and embrace. But it's definitely an area that you have to build up a little bit of a tolerance to, right?
So you talk about data, and you and I are looking at data constantly every day. But I think for many people, the idea of only using the data and not the intuition that they've built up over years of talking to customers or insights that they feel like they have internally. I mean, when can you use that as your starting point versus, because when I hear you talking about and putting myself in the shoes of a contractor, like, well, now I need to go invest in some digital software to track the data. I'm going to need to now hire someone new to bring on to help with this sort of thing. I mean, it feels like a lot.
Yeah, and I think being able to report on it is one area, but it can be in different ways. And starting by the response rate of people's emails, how many calls you make, and how many kind of end up closing. That's a good place to start from that side. The data volumes can actually be quite low, and it can be measured in various different ways from that side. Like I said, if you're just wanting to send out inquiries or send out responses, it's a good way to just see what's working and what's not to begin with, and starting slow. You definitely don't need a huge warehouse of information in order to make decisions, and actually sometimes that can hold you back. So starting small, starting simple is a great way to see what's working.
So should people who are listening, should they look into best practices, or use that intuition based on what you're seeing in your own business? Is it a combination of both, where that starting point really is?
Yeah, I mean, we work for all sorts of different areas and sectors and industries, and there are some things which carry over. But for the majority, all of the businesses are unique and have their own challenges in different industries and sectors and their own benefits. So the best practice area is one option. But I think, you look at two different companies, they aren't exactly the same. So what works for one definitely does not work for another. What you want to do is start understanding what system can you build that is repeatable and that what works. It may be that a couple of those things can work, but the one thing that I think in our time together we've understood is that the reliability of your own customers, your own team providing information is the best source. So I would say, before trying to apply what somebody else is telling you is the right thing to do, find out from yourself what is working and try and elevate that. Is always a much better start, I would say.
And I think it's important for all of the people who have been on LED Lighting Supply's website that are listening. I certainly appreciate you always making it so that I lose the bet of what test version is going to win or what my hypothesis is, if it's going to win or not. I keep losing, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think there is an area. We're not trying to predict the future. Our goal is finding the quickest way to grow and adapt. And the understanding of kind of winning, losing, or even prediction, it can be fun. But at the end of the day, what we love more is understanding what has worked and why it has, to do more of it. And I think that's the difference between kind of professionals who are trying to make recommendations versus somebody else who goes, well, the best approach is to start doing things and then see what works and do more of it. The quicker you can do that in the shortest time frame, the better your decisions will be. And I think that's what we've done, is built up a system that works quickly and rapidly to learn about what works, what doesn't, and then move from that way. But yeah, it can be a humbling place, but it's not an area to shy away from. It's just an opportunity to learn and grow. And it's how a lot of these kind of larger businesses, like Facebook, are talking about failing fast, not seeing it as a danger, but seeing it as an opportunity to close down an avenue and start another.
In our experimentation program, if we had just implemented all of the versions that I personally thought would have won, we would be far behind where we are today. the business would not be where we probably would not be in a podcast studio right now talking about this topic right now. And so the failures are so important, because also the failures we can then take and figure out, okay, when we try something next time, we're not starting from zero. We're starting with the learnings and the understandings that we received from how we failed before, and research that we're doing on an ongoing basis. It all is so interconnected. But I do want to ask you, Paul, so if you think about contractors, facilities managers, you have small shops, you have medium shops, large shops, like any industry. If we're to think about the organizations that have a marketing team, at the very least, they have one marketing manager on the team who's responsible for everything in marketing, probably also responsible for managing the CRM, managing the sales email templates, and everything else in between. But they handle marketing. From that person up to a bit larger, where experimentation or testing things isn't really at the forefront. You've talked to a lot of companies that are just starting in this space. How can that person, or what do they need to do to become educated enough to be able to go to the CEO of the company and say, this is something we should start investing money in?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that you are not your customer. And also you can get very bored of your own content and your own sites. Every time you look at it, you're looking at it in a very different way to that of your customers. I started off in user research, and the easiest and simplest way is to have your site, or what you're trying to market, in front of people in a coffee shop, in somewhere that is a space that your customers would be in, and to gather that feedback, because you can talk about it internally, but I think the understanding is that you as a company will be biased to it, and your lens will be very different to that of a customer. So embrace the feedback that somebody gives you when they see your website in a coffee shop and asks you really genuine and honest questions. And the beauty of user research is that between 5 and 8 people is really what you need in order to get a repetition of the key themes, which is the starting point to, how might I grow? How might I improve from that side? And it doesn't take a lot of time, and it doesn't take a lot of money, but it's that willingness to gather that feedback and then move forward. The reason why I say this starts working so well, even from small and large companies, is that this feedback is really resonant when you share it with somebody else. You can kind of take the quotes, you can maybe record some of the comments, and you can feed it back to them, and their understanding of it will be very different. But being able to shine a light on how somebody else sees your website, sees your content, sees your product, is a great way to then start the conversation of how might we improve it from that side. And it's where where you start. It's the customer's perspective and the customer's view, which I think is the foundation here from all of this.
What sort of expense could a company looking into user research expect? Are we talking hundreds of dollars, thousands, tens of thousands of dollars?
Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be more than the hundreds of dollars for the participants. There are sites online that you can get user research from. As I said, you can do the coffee shop side, which is also a good place to start. I would say the idea is to do it little and often, as much as possible. And we've done a lot of user research. You can get the right type of customers, the people who are your types of audience, to then browse certain links and websites and then gather that feedback. And yeah, it's a great starting point. And a lot of sites out there like user testing, which is a good place to go to. They charge per user. And like I said, for 5 to 8 users, it's a really good place to begin.
And for a company, let's say even a little bit larger, we have a robust marketing team now. Company, the contractor is now quite profitable. They're ready to really start driving growth. Do you still start with user research there, or do you take your toe and dip it in maybe a little further with a more broad program option?
I think if you've got a reasonable volume, then the data in analytics is a really good place to start. the strong data in how a certain website is performing is almost the place to begin with then. Once you know you're getting a lot of traffic to a certain site or certain pages, or if you have landing pages or you're running any type of advertising, you'll know the performance of how those ads and how those pages are working. That's a good place to start to know where I want to do more and drive more volume, and also areas where I want to try and improve. So in those larger businesses, you can begin starting with the data. Again, point it to your sort of senior team and say, here's an area of opportunity, but this is how I'm going to try and discover it. Everyone will have an opinion internally. And I think that's what it's trying to do, is avoid that sort of opinion decision making and say, well, I'm going to get some feedback first and use the research and testing in some sort of way to determine what's the right thing.
The data is so useful once you can actually see it together. It feels like noise when we're just sort of living in it, running as fast as we can to try to grow the business or just stay afloat with everything going on in the world. It's certainly not a tough, not an easy time to run a business and keep it afloat. But programs like this, having been in the middle of them, they 100% are worth the investment, be it if we're talking a small program or dipping our toe in, or if we're looking at, okay, we've done some research around what's happening with our customers. Now let's take it to the next level and actually start testing how do we get more warehouses who are looking for lighting upgrades to use us to do their installation. And in the process of getting to that improvement, there's a lot that goes into it, but you have to start somewhere.
I think that's the thing. You don't want to try and do everything at once. Kind of list out what your key kind of objectives and goals are, and create a series of ideas of how you might try and reach that and improve on it. Could be increasing the volume and total number. It could be increasing the quality of the leads that you get or the amount that's being sold, but trying to be very specific about what you want to achieve and then find a number of different ways to do it. Yeah, there's so much to do. I think that focus is another area for successful programs where they know what to say no to. I feel like people, when they talk about strategy, it's knowing what to ruthlessly say no to, so they say yes to other things. And we've had a lot of that. You know, it's a new and hot topic. Should we focus on it? Probably not, because our key objective is to do this and drive that. Could be increasing lead volume, increase of lighting plan inquiries. That's the primary thing that we want to do. This new area is probably not something that's worth our focus to change now. And that's what I would say to start, is have a couple of kind of key areas to tackle and start with there.
Should contractors and facilities managers be running towards AI?
Yeah, I mean, AI is maybe similar to the best practice type approach. I guess the question is how it's applied and how it's used. We're not actively using AI for the recommendations at the moment, but what I think it is great for, and what everyone should begin using it for, is a sounding board. A two-way, if I want to ask this question, what else should I think about? Or what else could I do? And as a way of extracting more and more from yourself first before you then take it out from someone else. I mean, in AI, it will tell you whatever it wants you to hear. There's been a lot of that as well, and the trusting of the data and where it comes from can sometimes be questioned. But it's not to be kind of sneered at or revered. It is a huge enabler. But I think, like anything, it's a tool to find out where it works for you, and not to sort of point it as the thing that will fix everything. It's like saying websites. Websites aren't the foundation of everything. Without a website, you still need a team behind you. You still need the products themselves, the distribution. And so it's one component, I think, but not something that you should sort of fix all your hopes on.
We on our website have started to see more and more people who are chatting in, asking, are you AI or are you a real person? And then our team, for anyone who has been to our website, knows that we have real team members who are on chat during the day. So similar to that company doing the radio advertisement where they have real people answering the phone, which we do too, but there's real people who are there to answer your chats and answer your calls. After our team members say, yes, I'm a real person, the next comment from the person almost every single time is prove it. So on chat, Paul, how do people prove that they're a real person when they're chatting with a potential customer?
It's a great question. They just want proof, don't they? It could be a photo. It could be, ask me a question that AI is not going to know about. It's just that kind of human rapport and connection that you want to establish really quickly. And I think we have got to a sense of not quite knowing in some areas, and AI feeling very familiar and chatty. And so you just want to talk to somebody in a real way and find out, that authenticity, what can come through. You know, what are you watching at the moment on TV? How's your sports team doing, or whatever. Just find a way of building a connection quite quickly that you can understand. It's sad in a way that we need that, but I think it's because the experiences that we have around, which is also kind of worth knowing, that yourself, your customers are interacting and having so many other conversations with other people, that what is now the norm of chatting with robots is something that necessarily they don't always want to get, or they don't want to do that because they're not getting out of it what they want to. So that's why speaking to somebody who can reply quickly and has enough knowledge is a selling point nowadays, when it was the standard for such a long period of time. But it's interesting. Probably was a case that AI was added and implemented in certain areas, and they didn't necessarily test it, and they weren't getting the feedback that was asking them, are you a real person? And they were using it and stopping it, because how would the AI respond to that? It probably would mean that there aren't many more chats going after that, I would say.
Absolutely. Well, I will say a way that I've used AI a lot recently that's been super useful at reducing time that I would otherwise use on this task is related to spreadsheets. I have used spreadsheets for a long time. I'd consider myself a moderate to advanced spreadsheet user in Excel. But every now and then I just can't figure out how do I change all 1,000 columns at one time. For anyone who hasn't had or has had a spreadsheet like that, if you haven't taken it over to ChatGPT or one of these AI tools, upload your spreadsheet, tell it what you need it to do. If it does it a little wrong, tell it what it did wrong and ask it to do it again. It is lights out going to save you hours every month. I'm telling you, it's amazing.
I would, I'm a huge advocate of AI as a way of asking better, more intelligent questions. I think that the thing that people find with Google is you type in something and it gives you an answer. The beauty with AI is you can tell it to ask you more questions. So if you're trying to find out some requirements for, warehouse lighting or high bays or whatever it is, it's like, well, what else do I need to know? Tell me what else I should be considering and thinking about that I don't already know. And it's like having a bit of an expert in some ways, but it's like having another mirror to a question. And doing that enough times really enhances then when you do talk to a real person, you're either more understanding, you have more of an acceptance of what they're looking for. And yeah, it's a great way, I think, where we can find out a little bit more quite quickly and be averse. You were talking about Excel, and my thought of using it was be like, I want to make this change. How can I do it? And it giving you the control to be able to do that. So yeah, it's great. It's interesting. It's very scary. We also don't have a lot of
Very scary.
control on the direction. So I think, being able to solely rely on it is a very interesting thing. But yeah, for data analysis, for wide scale changes, it's hugely important. But I would say that you still want to have trusted individuals who are making those big decisions. I don't think we want to rely everything at the moment on AI to make those decisions for us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Paul, so anyone who would be interested in learning more about experimentation or user testing or Speero where should they go? What would be some good resources for them to check out?
Yeah, I would say our website is speero.com is a good place to go around experimentation in general. And I'm on LinkedIn as Paul Randall, and I will talk about sort of frameworks and experimentation in a sort of a slightly different way as well. Like gardening experimentation and things like that. I think the experimentation mindset is what I talk about from that side. Our website is pretty good if you're looking for specifics around experimentation, and I'd say there are two good places to go.
But before we wrap up, could you tell the audience about your recent gardening experiment that's ongoing?
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah, so I'm creating a veg patch, and because I have the mindset of an experimenter that I can't help anymore, I'm already thinking about how to avoid slugs from my tomatoes and my peppers. Of course, you do some research, but at the end of the day, everyone's going to tell you a different tip, a different technique. And so what I'm doing is trying out a couple of different ways. And I think that's kind of the mindset in general is trialing, finding out what works, and then applying it going forward. So I may or may not have any plants at the end of it, but I've learned what I should be doing more of next time, I would say.
And I, of course, as a typical American, told you to buy the bug assault salt gun that you can shoot at the slugs.
Yeah. Yeah. I've also heard beard traps and everything else like that. But yeah, it's interesting how these kind of things naturally find your way into your personal life with that mindset. You can't help but think about things from an experiment every single time.
Well, that's great. Well, good luck with the slugs. Thank you for joining us today on the Project Advantage, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me.